Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, changing course. President Trump signs a late-day executive order and makes a major reversal on his tariff policy, suspending the surcharges on some goods coming into America from Canada and Mexico. Dismantling the department. Education Secretary Linda McMahon has said it's the department's, quote, final mission. CBS News sources confirm President Trump is expected to issue an executive order to dissolve the Education Department, and we're tracking the timing on that move. And what about the economy? The Trump administration's massive federal cuts and rising economic uncertainty, the 1-2 punch that's helped to fuel a recession-level spike in layoffs. Let's start tonight with Scott MacFarlane and Weijia Jiang on all of this. Weijia, you're at the White House. We'll start with you. So what are we seeing here with Trump backtracking on tariffs? Where do things stand?
So the latest, Caitlin, is that he just signed executive orders to put a pause, an exemption on some of the goods coming in from Mexico and Canada. And those are the products that are compliant with the USMCA, which is, of course, is the trade deal that all three countries participate in. So that's about 50% of Mexican goods and 38% of Canadian goods. And he also yesterday put a 1-month exemption on automobiles, too. And I think, what we are seeing in public is one thing, when the president speaks very toughly on tariffs. But we also know that behind the scenes, his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, has been having nonstop negotiations with Mexico and Canada. And so what we don't know exactly is what these two countries put on the table, whether they offered any concessions to get Trump to, walk back at least a little bit. But there are obviously external pressures as well, including pressure from American companies and, of course, the stock market.
And Scott, some of the pressure, though not as tough, has been coming from some lawmakers on Capitol Hill, especially those Republicans who say, we don't like tariffs the way that you like tariffs. What's kind of the feeling up there?
I think the concern is most acute among those who have those automotive congressional districts. There are Republicans who have huge swaths of Michigan, huge swaths of Ohio, obviously, and these have direct impact on auto workers, on the providers, the contractors, the private companies that help serve the automakers, and, oh, by the way, the auto workers. But I think you get a more universal concern on tariffs when you hear the forecast from Canada that this could increase the price of cars by thousands of dollars. Now you've got a national issue, and this is where the pushback comes. I think for Republicans, from what we hear from our sources, the pushback is in the form of questions behind closed doors. From Democrats, the pushback is a little less subtle and more aggressive. But boy, when you start talking about prices, you hit the sweet spot of what Democrats want to be talking about in the first couple of months.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for an increase on something that most people need. Weijia, we know that lawmakers are watching the stock market. We know the president is one who definitely watches the stock market. And we saw Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying that the stock market is not driving their decision on tariffs here. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
The president wants American growth and American prosperity. Okay, and the fact if the stock market goes down 0.5% or 1%, it goes up 0.5% or 1%, that is not the driving force of our outcomes. Our outcomes are driven by, we want factory production in America, we want employment to explode in America.
Weijia, I know you've done a lot of reporting over the past few days about what has gone into this as it's ever changing. But from what you know, I mean, how much is the stock market playing a role here?
Well, White House aides I've spoken to have not been able to deny that it is a factor. It may not be a driving factor, but it has a seat in the car when we're talking about tariffs. I mean, we're talking about Donald Trump, who before his political career was a businessman in New York City. And so, of course, he pays attention to Wall Street, and these numbers matter to him. But overall, he does insist essentially no pain, no gain. And he has said there has to be a disturbance, that farmers have to make an adjustment. But, the question is how much? And that's what people at home want to know. How much are you asking us to pay in the meantime in order to get this, vision accomplished of a manufacturing boom in the U.S. so we have American-made products instead of having to import foreign ones that have a tariff attached to them? Well, that takes years. It takes years when you're talking and asking about companies to just come to America and produce here instead. That's all fine and well, even if they do. Some companies have decided to do that, including Japanese automaker Honda for their next plant. But again, you can't just snap your fingers overnight and have a plant up and running. And so, the stock market is one factor. There are certainly others as well, again, as Scott laid out. And it's, people and complaints and pressure, not only from Democrats, but Republicans.
And Scott, another area, we've been talking about DOGE cuts to government for weeks now, but one area that could be impacted is the Office of Veterans Affairs. There are reports that thousands of jobs could be cut from that already pretty strapped agency. What's the significance of that? What have you been hearing? What's kind of the fallout?
This one lands differently than all the other many cuts at many agencies America is trying to navigate their way through. If you go back through the past 24 hours, you'll find all the local news clips members of Congress read. Beckley, West Virginia. What does this mean to the Beckley VA Medical Center? Buffalo Television today. What does this mean for the Buffalo VA Medical Center and the clinics in Niagara Falls? And these are the things lawmakers are looking through because they recognize this is an agency that has already been under scrutiny for having a shortage of workers in some communities, a shortcoming in the services, either wait times are too long, clinics are too understaffed, or the services aren't up to par the way they should be for American heroes. So this one just lands differently. And I think based on what you're hearing from your congressional sources, and we are hearing from ours, is that this one just climbed its way to the top of the priority list because it can impact things not next year or next month, but in the next few days.
Yeah, and even federal workers may not elicit the kind of sympathy that they might want, but veterans sure do across the board. We'll keep an eye on that. Scott MacFarlane and Weijia Jiang, thank you so much.